Two friends stand at a crossroads, one taking the easy road, the other the right one. This split second reveals the core of our character. An ancient philosopher, Aristotle, offers a powerful map for these very moments, a guide to living well called virtue ethics. By the end of this journey, you will have a practical toolkit for navigating your own toughest decisions. We will explore why true courage is not the absence of fear, and how wisdom is less about knowing rules and more about reading a room. What is one choice you made recently that still makes you wonder if it was the right one? That choice you wonder about, the one that still lingers, often sits between two powerful urges. We feel the pull to act and the fear to hold back. Leo, a young man in his first real job, found himself in exactly that space. He discovered a discrepancy in a financial report, a small but intentional error that made his team's performance look better than it was. His first instinct was to say nothing. The fear was real, a cold weight in his stomach. He imagined his manager's anger, the potential isolation from his colleagues, maybe even losing his job. So he stayed silent. That silence felt like safety, but it quickly began to rot from the inside. He felt a growing shame, a sense that he had betrayed his own integrity for a paycheck. This was one extreme, the vice of cowardice, where fear completely overruled his sense of what was right. For Aristotle, cowardice is only one side of the coin. The opposite extreme would be recklessness, charging into his manager's office without a plan, fueled by self-righteous anger and likely making the situation far worse for everyone. Neither silence nor a furious confrontation was the virtuous path. Leo needed to find the middle ground, what Aristotle called the golden mean. This isn't a simple mathematical average. It is the right action for the right reason at the right time and toward the right people. For Leo, courage meant moving away from his paralyzing fear, but not toward blind recklessness. He started to prepare. He gathered the correct data, documented everything meticulously, and requested a private meeting with his direct supervisor. His heart hammered in his chest as he spoke, but his voice was steady. He presented the facts clearly, without accusation, focusing on the integrity of the report rather than blaming a person. This was the embodiment of courage, the golden mean in action. He felt the fear but was not controlled by it. He chose to act, but with wisdom and purpose. The outcome was uncertain, and that is the entire point. True virtue is about the quality of your action, not a guaranteed reward. In Leo's case, his manager was initially defensive, but later thanked him for his honesty, and the error was corrected. The virtue was in the courageous act itself, the choice to find that balance. Every day, we face our own versions of Leo's report. Do we stay silent to avoid conflict, or do we speak up with thoughtless anger? The golden mean asks us to find a third way, the narrow path of true strength that lies directly between them. Leo's story reveals a hidden ingredient within every courageous choice. That ingredient is practical wisdom, a skill as vital to a good life as a sharp knife is to a chef. In a small kitchen, a chef named Elena faces her own daily test. Her most popular dish, a signature stew, is on the menu, but today's shipment of a key herb never arrives. She could follow the recipe exactly, leaving out the herb and serving a dish she knows will be flat and disappointing. Or she could panic, throwing in every spice on the rack hoping something will work, likely creating a confusing mess. Elena does neither. She pauses, assesses her stocked pantry, and considers the preferences of the regular customers she knows so well. She recalls that a touch of smoked paprika and a fresh bay leaf can create a similar depth of flavor. She adjusts the recipe, tasting as she goes. The result is not the same stew, but it is a wonderful one, perfectly suited to the moment. This is practical wisdom in action. The ancient Greeks called this phronesis. It is not about memorizing a rule book. It is the cultivated ability to read a complex, changing situation and discern the right thing to do. For Aristotle, virtue is empty without this wisdom. You can know the definition of courage, but without practical wisdom, you cannot find the golden mean between cowardice and recklessness in the heat of the moment. This wisdom is what told Leo to gather his data and speak privately, rather than just knowing he should be honest. It is what tells a parent when to offer comfort and when to stand firm with a child. This skill is not inherited, it is earned. It is built through practice, through getting it wrong sometimes, and through quiet reflection on what worked and what did not. Every time you navigate a difficult conversation with a colleague, or decide how to help a friend in need without overstepping, you are in Elena's kitchen. You are not following a script, you are reading the room, weighing the ingredients at hand, and cooking up the right response for that unique and fleeting moment. It is a lifelong practice of paying attention. The same practical wisdom that guides a chef's hand must also weigh the scales of human relationships. Maria and Ben found their bond tested after their father's passing. His will was simple, dividing his modest estate equally between them. But the situation on the ground was far more complicated. Maria, the elder sister, had sacrificed her own career for years to care for their ailing father, managing his medications, his finances, and his final days. Ben, living across the country, had sent money when he could but had been largely absent. Now they stood in their father's old study, a single valuable family watch on the desk between them, and the air was thick with resentment. Ben insisted on the letter of the will, a simple 50-50 split of all assets, including the watch. Maria felt a deep, burning sense of injustice. An equal division felt profoundly unequal. Their arguments grew so heated they finally brought in a trusted family friend to mediate. The friend listened patiently to both sides. She did not focus solely on the legal document. Instead, she asked them to consider their father's entire life, his values, and the different kinds of contributions each had made. She asked Ben, would your father have thought it fair for Maria's years of devotion to count for nothing? She asked Maria, did you believe your brother's love was measured only by his physical presence? This mediator was guiding them toward Aristotle's complex view of justice. For him, justice is the complete virtue, the one that encompasses all the others because it is exercised in our relations with others. It has two key phases. The first is about obeying the law, the straightforward rules of a society. But the second, and often more vital, is distributive justice. This is not about simple equality. It is about fairness and proportionality. It asks what is the right share for each person based on their need, their merit, and their contribution. A just distribution does not give the same size portion to a child and an adult, or the same reward to a casual participant and the one who dedicated their life to the endeavor. In the case of Maria and Ben, a truly just solution had to consider the whole picture. Maria had contributed an immense investment of time, energy, and love. Ben had contributed financial support and a different kind of familial bond. The fair outcome was not a cold, mathematical split, but a proportional one that honored those different contributions. They eventually decided Maria would keep the watch, a symbol of the time she had spent with their father, while the remaining assets were divided in a way that recognized Ben's financial support. The resolution was not perfectly equal, but it was far more fair. This is the challenge of justice in our own lives. Do we insist on our strict legal right in a dispute, or do we seek a proportional solution that acknowledges the full human context? Justice, in its highest form, is the difficult art of giving each person their true due. That quiet study where Maria and Ben found a fair solution reveals a truth that echoes far beyond family. We are, by nature, social creatures, and the bonds we form are the very soil in which virtue grows. On a neglected city block, a different kind of justice was taking root. A patch of land between 3 apartment buildings had become a dumping ground, an eyesore that fueled resentment among the neighbors. Arguments over parking and noise were common. Then a retired teacher named Arthur decided to plant a single tomato seedling in the corner of the lot. It was a small act of defiance against the collective neglect. A young mother, seeing him struggle with the hard soil, brought out a trowel. A college student, drawn by the curious activity, helped carry away some trash. This was the humble beginning of what they would later call the neighborhood project. No one organized it at first. It simply grew, one small act at a time. As they cleared the weeds and built raised beds, something else began to bloom. They started talking not just about the garden, but about their lives. They discovered the retired teacher had a wealth of knowledge about composting. The young mother knew how to source cheap, quality soil. The college student had a knack for building simple, sturdy trellises. Their initial interactions were friendships of utility. They were useful to each other for a shared, practical goal. As the work became less of a chore and more of a shared joy, with laughter during watering sessions and shared meals from the first harvest, it became a friendship of pleasure. They enjoyed each other's company, but something deeper was taking root. Aristotle identified these three types of friendship for a reason. The first, based on utility, lasts only as long as the benefit. The second, based on pleasure, fades when the fun does, but the third, the highest form, is friendship of virtue. This is not about what you can get from the other person or how they make you feel. It is about a shared commitment to what is good, noble, and right. You admire the character of your friend, and they admire yours. You wish for each other's growth and flourishing. In the garden, this began to happen. When a neighbor fell ill, others tended their plot without being asked. When a dispute arose about the water schedule, they worked it out with respect, valuing the community over being right. They were no longer just neighbors cooperating. They had become friends who cared for each other's character. They held each other to a higher standard, not with judgment, but with quiet encouragement. A flourishing life, a life of true happiness or eudaimonia, is almost impossible to achieve alone. We need these virtuous friends. They are our mirrors and our anchors. They help us see our own blind spots and celebrate our growth. They are the people with whom we practice justice, courage, and wisdom in real time. The garden, in the end, produced more than just vegetables. It yielded a resilient network of care, a community where individuals could become their best selves, supported by bonds that were not transactional but transformational. Chloe stared at the blank canvas, a universe of potential that felt more like a prison. On her phone, a world of instant gratification beckoned with endless scrolls and viral videos. The desire to pick it up was a physical pull, a promise of easy dopamine to silence the difficult whisper of her ambition. For weeks, this was her cycle. She would set up her paints with grand intentions, only to find herself hours later, slumped on the couch, the canvas still empty and her mind numbed by distraction. She was not lazy. She was caught in a tug-of-war between two powerful desires. One was the shallow, immediate pleasure of entertainment. The other was the deep, lasting satisfaction of creating something meaningful. She mistakenly believed that being a good artist meant crushing the first desire, living a life of grim, pleasureless discipline. But Aristotle would say she was looking at it all wrong. His concept of temperance is not about suppression or denial. It is not about being a joyless ascetic. Temperance is the virtue of rational management. It is the wisdom that allows us to steward our appetites and our pleasures, ensuring they serve our overall well-being and our highest goals, rather than ruling us for a moment's gratification. The vicious extreme here is overindulgence or profligacy. This is when we let our desires for pleasure, like distraction or comfort, run the show completely. Chloe was living in this space, her artistic dreams perpetually postponed for the easier hit of a screen. The opposite vice, though it sounds noble, is insensibility, a complete lack of interest in any pleasure whatsoever. An artist who feels no joy in color, no delight in food or company, is as imbalanced as the one who only seeks distraction. they are cut off from the very sensory world that fuels their art. The golden mean, the virtue of temperance, lies directly in the middle. For Chloe, it meant not fighting the desire for pleasure, but redirecting it. She began to consciously connect the act of painting to pleasure. She would brew a special tea she loved only when she was at her easel. She put on music that made her feel inspired and capable. She learned to savor the small victories, the satisfaction of mixing the perfect color or nailing a difficult line. She was not eliminating her appetite for enjoyment. She was training it to find its deepest fulfillment in the work itself. The distraction of her phone began to feel cheap and thin compared to the profound engagement of creation. Her desire was not the enemy, it was a powerful river that had been flooding its banks. Through temperance, she learned to build canals to channel that same energy and craving toward the fertile ground of her craft. She managed her appetite so they served her life's purpose. This is the practical power of temperance in your own life. It asks, what is this desire truly for? Is the craving for a sweet snack really about hunger, or is it a search for a moment of comfort? Is the desire to scroll endlessly a need for rest or a fear of starting a difficult task? Temperance gives you the space to ask that question. It allows you to choose the greater pleasure, the one that aligns with who you want to become, over the lesser one that only lasts for a moment. It is the quiet power that turns a scattered wish into a focused will. Alex failed. The marathon course stretched out behind him, a 26-mile testament to his own lack of preparation. He had not even reached the halfway point when his body gave out, cramped and exhausted. He had believed that raw talent and a last-minute burst of willpower would be enough. The crushing reality was that a marathon cannot be faked. It reveals the truth of your training or lack of it with every painful step. In that moment of defeat, Alex understood something profound about excellence. The Greeks had a word for it, arit. It does not mean a single moment of glory. It means being outstanding at your function, whether you are a craftsman, a leader, or a runner. For a runner, arit is the ability to complete the race and do it well. Alex saw that he had not failed on race day. He had failed on all those quiet mornings when he chose to hit the snooze button instead of lacing up his shoes. He had failed in the daily, invisible choices. Aristotle's most famous insight landed on him with the weight of truth. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Alex decided to build a new habit of excellence one day at a time. He did not set a grand goal to win a race. His goal was simply to run today and then to run again tomorrow. He started with short, manageable distances, focusing on consistency over speed. Some days it felt effortless, a joy. Other days it was a grind, a battle against his own desire to quit. But he ran anyway. He was not just training his body, he was training his character. He was forging a new state of being through repetition. The first time he had to run in the cold rain, it was a monumental act of will. By the 10th time, it was just what he did. He was no longer fighting a desire to stay dry. He had become the kind of person who runs rain or shine. This is the very mechanism of virtue. We become just by performing just actions. We become courageous by acting courageously. We build the habit until it becomes our nature. A year later, Alex stood at the same starting line. The race was the same, but he was not. This time, there was no anxiety, only a quiet confidence. He knew he had put in the work. Every mile was a confirmation of the hundreds of training miles that had come before. When he crossed the finish line, the victory was not in the medal, but in the knowledge that he had earned it day by patient day. His character had been remade through practice. Your life is a similar training ground. Every time you choose patience in a frustrating line, you are not just getting through a moment. You are building the habit of patience. Every time you choose to tell the hard truth, you are strengthening the muscle of honesty. Virtue is a state of character, a reliable disposition to feel, desire, and act in the right way, forged in the countless small forges of ordinary life. Who are you becoming through the things you do each day? The same discipline Alex forged on the track is tested every day in the quiet hum of an office. Sarah managed a team at a growing tech company, and her quarterly review landed with a thud. Her team had exceeded their profit targets, but the human cost was written in the tired faces around her. They had pushed through crunch time, working late nights and weekends, and the burnout was palpable. The company's success bonus was substantial, and the easy, compliant path was to distribute it exactly as the handbook suggested, a standard percentage for everyone. But Sarah felt a deep unease. A simple, equal split felt unjust. It ignored the disproportionate effort some had given and the personal sacrifices that had been made. This was her marathon. Her first instinct was a form of cowardice, to follow the policy blindly and avoid any difficult conversations. The opposite extreme, a kind of reckless generosity, would be to empty the entire bonus pool without regard for company sustainability or precedent. She needed to find the golden mean. She began with truthfulness, scheduling honest, private conversations to understand each team member's experience and needs. Then she exercised a form of generosity that was not about the total sum, but about the right share. She allocated the bonus proportionally, giving more to those who had carried the heaviest load, and she did it with a clear, compassionate explanation that focused on fairness, not favoritism. She was ambitious for her team's success, but that ambition was tempered by a deeper commitment to their long-term well-being. She knew a short-term profit win that broke her team's spirit was a long-term failure. Aristotle's framework turns management from a series of compliance checkboxes into a daily practice of character. It asks a leader not just what the rules are, but what is right. For Sarah, justice meant a fair, proportional distribution of rewards. Courage meant having the difficult conversations required to make that happen. Practical wisdom was her ability to read the unique context of her team and discern that a rigid rule would be unfair. This is how virtue ethics builds organizations that are resilient and humane. It moves beyond mere legal compliance, which is just the bare minimum, and focuses on cultivating an environment where people can flourish. When a manager leads with character, they are not just hitting targets. They are building trust, fostering loyalty, and creating a culture where excellence becomes a habit for everyone. The health of the balance sheet and the health of the human spirit are not in opposition. They are two sides of the same coin, and the virtuous manager is the one who knows how to make both sides shine. Samuel had done everything right. For 40 years, his hands had shaped this land, his character forged by the daily discipline of the harvest. He was the embodiment of Aristotelian virtue, a man of practical wisdom, courage, and justice in his dealings. His flourishing, his eudaimonia, was not an abstract idea. It was the sight of golden wheat swaying in the sun, the fruit of a life well lived. Then, in one furious hour, the sky turned green and a hailstorm of biblical fury descended. When it passed, his fields were a wasteland of shattered stalks and mud. His annual harvest, his livelihood, his life's work was utterly gone. Samuel stood in the wreckage, a virtuous man brought to his knees by a random act of nature. This moment forces a difficult question. If a good life is built on character, what happens when the world, through no fault of your own, tears down everything you've built? Aristotle was profoundly realistic about this. He argued that while virtue is the very core of human flourishing, it is not the whole picture. He acknowledged the role of what he called external goods, things like health, a moderate amount of wealth, friendship, and even good fortune. You can be the most courageous and wise person alive, but a sudden illness, a natural disaster, or profound loneliness can make the achievement of a fully flourishing life incredibly difficult. A great musician needs an instrument. A virtuous person needs a stage on which to practice their virtue. Samuel's farm was that stage. The storm did not make him any less virtuous. His character remained intact, but his ability to express that character, to reap the rewards of his lifelong habits, was catastrophically diminished. His eudaimonia was deeply wounded. So where does that leave us in a world full of unforeseen storms? The answer lies not in denying the pain of the loss, but in where Samuel looked next. He did not curse the heavens or surrender to despair. His virtue, now tested in a new and brutal way, shifted its focus. His courage was no longer about the endurance of hard labor, but about the endurance of devastating loss. His practical wisdom was no longer about crop rotation, but about navigating aid and planning for the next season against a tide of grief. His resilience was shown in his response. He reached out to his neighbors, activating those friendships of virtue. He accepted help with grace and offered help where he still could, sharing his knowledge with younger farmers. He was exercising his virtues in a diminished landscape, refusing to let his character be destroyed just because his crop had been. The goal was not to pretend he was as happy as before. It was to rebuild a meaningful life from the ruins, using the same tools of character that had built it the first time. This is the sobering, humane truth of Aristotle's ethics. Virtue is the one thing that is truly ours to control, our internal compass. But we are also physical beings in a fragile world. Our flourishing depends on a partnership between our inner state and our outer circumstances. The storms of life test not whether we are happy, but whether our character is deep enough to find meaning even in the struggle, to plant new seeds in the mud, and to trust that some harvests are invisible, growing slowly in the resilience of the human spirit. Samuel stood in the mud, a man of virtue facing a storm he did not cause. His story, like those of Leo, Elena, Maria and Ben, Arthur, Chloe and Alex, is not a distant parable. It is a living map of the virtues that shape a flourishing life. We saw courage in Leo, who felt his fear but spoke the truth with careful preparation. Practical wisdom guided Elena's hand in the kitchen, showing us how to read a complex situation and cook up the right response. Maria and Ben discovered that justice is not cold equality, but a proportional fairness that honors the full tapestry of contribution. In Arthur's garden, friendship blossomed from utility into a bond of shared virtue, where people hold each other to a higher standard. Chloe learned that temperance is not the denial of pleasure, but the art of channeling our desires toward what truly fulfills us. And Alex, on the marathon course, proved that excellence is a habit built one choice, one run, one day at a time. This is the profound simplicity of Aristotelian ethics. It is not a list of abstract rules to memorize. It is a practical guide to living well, written in the stories of our own lives. Every single day, you are presented with choices that are your own versions of the financial report. The missing herb, the family watch, the empty lot, the blank canvas, and the starting line. Your character is being shaped in these moments. The question is not whether you will be perfect, but whether you are paying attention. Think of one choice you made this week. Did it lean toward an extreme, or did you find that narrow, golden path? Your story is the next chapter in this ancient and ongoing conversation. Share it below. Tell us about a time you struggled to find the virtuous path. Your experience might just be the map someone else needs to find their way.